This battle might be won, but your war for the truth goes on. Join Britain's Hidden History, Sunday nights on YouTube. Paul Smith and guests lead the search for truth.
First on BBC One.
Good evening and welcome to episode 57 of the History CV of Britain. I'm your host, Paul, and in this evening's show, I'll be talking to the author of Traces of Troynovantum, which is an absolutely brilliant book that I've almost finished. There it is there. Whoops, there goes the thingy. Absolutely outstanding read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learnt loads about London that I didn't know previously, especially obviously about pre-Roman London. And yes, it did exist. Doesn't matter what the academics say. There's lots of evidence for London being a very busy place and a settlement prior to Julius Caesar's invasion in the the 50s BC. So lots to look forward to on that front. Now, first of all, and by the way, I should say I'm off to a flyer already because I accidentally pressed the intro halfway through my opening, of the BHH thing. So apologies for that. Hooray! Look, there you go. Where Jesus is buried, Wilson and Blackett. How the Holy Family came to Wales after the crucifixion, and Britain became the world's first Christian country. So I've wanted to read this for years, actually. And I should say a very, very big thank you to Stephen Lashbrook, who might be in the chat, for sending me his copy. Sadly, it's out of print at the moment. Hopefully that will be sorted at some point in the future. But yeah, so I've got this. Came through the door a couple of days ago. And I've already read 60 pages and it's absolutely brilliant. It's really good. It's great being able to watch videos on Wilson and Blackett and the old BHH lives with Ross Broadstock and all the videos he did. But when you've actually got it in your hands and you're reading it for yourself, it's magic. It really is magic, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I will be doing a special presentation on this. Actually, two things. I'll be doing a special presentation on this. I think it will be on the 15th of March. So in 3 weeks' time, I'll be flying solo on this show and doing a whole presentation on this book once I've read it. And I'm also going to be recording an audiobook version of this and putting it on this channel, on the BHH channel. So look out for that. That will start very soon, probably this week, I would imagine. And I'll be doing it chapter by chapter. So, you'll be able to listen to me reading this book in its entirety in the next few days. And I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to reading this. The first chapter is on the Essenes, who were a very interesting Judaic sect living in the Holy Land around the time of Jesus. And so much in here that I didn't know that Alan Wilson has discovered and written about. And wow, just an amazing historian with so much knowledge. So I can't wait to get through that. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. I should mention before I forget that this also came through the post about a week ago. This is the newsletter of the Network of Lay Hunters, a magazine, a quarterly magazine that's edited by Lawrence Main, Druid Lawrence. They're quarterly. You can go over to the Network of Lay Hunters website and sign up for this quarterly magazine. It's only £20 a year, which is ridiculously cheap if you ask me for what you get. And in this particular edition, trying to find it, there we are. There is part 2 of Albine, Princess of Ur, Queen of Britain, by Marshall Abrahams, who of course you all know very well. And it's absolutely fascinating, and she's building up on the evidence that she already provided in her book, The Great Migrations, on the Albine migration to Britain. So get a copy of that. Hugh Evans is in here as well. I'm trying to remember. I did read it. If you're watching Hugh, there's a picture, little article on Nosh, also known as John Neal. And I had the pleasure of interviewing John last year. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but you won't find a better ancient metrologist than John Neal. And there was something in here written by Hugh. There it is there. He's written an article on the Union flag and its meaning. It's very, very interesting. And there's other great writers in here as well. Maria Wheatley has written an article on the long-headed civilization, surgery, healing temples and earth energies. And she was my guest a couple of weeks ago on the History CV of Britain. I've got a book here, actually. If you've not read it, if you're interested in megaliths, and in particular Stonehenge, this book is an absolute gem. It's really good. It's the best book I've read on Stonehenge. About 400 pages. And there's so much stuff in here that you really need to know about if you're interested in megaliths and Stonehenge. Fantastic book. Can't recommend it enough. Right, where are we up to? Bear with me a second. You know what I'm like. Okay. Yes, next thing. It's looking like our meetup in London, our Britain's Hidden History meetup in London, is going to take place on the 12th of April, which is a Sunday. I'm just waiting for one more key person to confirm that date, and then it will be going ahead. And of course, tonight's guest, Rob Shaw, will be there, and we'll be doing the Hawksmoor Walk. So we'll be walking and seeing and taking in every single church that Hawksmoor designed in the, I think it was in the 1660s, 1670s. Very strange looking churches, one of which is Christ Church in Whitechapel. And I'm really into Whitechapel because of the Whitechapel murders of 1888. So I'm really looking forward to it. It takes about 3 hours apparently to do the whole walk. So if you're not fit, you might want to probably miss that one. But if you can manage the walk, there's going to be a meal afterwards and a few drinks. So that should be lots of fun. Right, okay. The next thing I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you a video that I made. It's only a very short video, about 5-10 minutes long. And it's on a pagan god who was worshipped in this country in the 1st century AD. And his name was Esus, E-S-U-S, which in itself is quite a thing, as I'm sure you can imagine. That's a very odd name for a pagan god. And he was being worshipped at the time of Jesus. So I'm going to show you that because it's quite pertinent to this evening's subject matter. One of the chapters in Rob's book is on the old Celtic gods. So I thought I would show this. Just before I do that, my my Restream studio has been updated, as you know, and I'm going to see if I can bring up the chat. Now, apparently, I can only have the chat there. I don't know if you can see the chat on screen. I can see it on my screen, but I don't know if you can see it on your screen. So, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get up. Let's see if I can bring up a comment on the... No, I don't think I can. I should have... I need to be in this studio a lot more often to know what's going on, because they've updated it. Anyway, let me see. I can see that we've got Andrew Christie with us, Daniela McNeil, Marshall Abrahams. While I think of it, please like the video, hype the video, and if you're new to the Britain's Hidden History YouTube channel, please subscribe to our channel. We're hoping to build on the amazing work done by Ross Broadstock. We want to keep this history going and show it to as many people as possible. And you can see the chat. Well, that's cool. I'm glad you can see the chat. I don't like it being on the screen, because I'm going to take it off in that case, because it's going to cover up Rob when he comes on, which is not going to be very good. But the thing is, I can't see it. I can normally see it to the side of my screen, but I can't anymore. So these, never mind. Okay, right, stop waffling, Paul. Okay, so let me see if I can remove that from the screen. Ah, yes. Right, done it. Good. Okay. Blimey. Right. Okay. Right. So let's show you that video then. It's only a quick one, but do try and take it in, because it will be pertinent to my last question for Rob this evening. And I think this is going to be a two-parter as well, because there's so much information in this book. There's so much information on London in this book that it's impossible to cover in one episode. So I think we'll do another part with Rob at some point next month. Anyway, so let me see if I can share screen, and we'll take in that short video together, and then I'll bring Rob on. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. Right, hopefully now you can see. Let me just see. Apply. It was while researching Roman client kings in ancient Britain that I stumbled across a god worshipped by pagans in Britain and Gaul in the 1st century CE, who was called Esus. We know about Esus from 3 primary sources. The Pillar of the Boatman is a monumental Roman column erected in Paris in honour of Jupiter in the 1st century. It is the oldest monument in Paris. Esus is portrayed on the 2nd tier of the monument, along with Jupiter, Tarvos Trigeranos, and Vulcan. Jupiter is holding a spear and a thunderbolt. Esus is shown standing beside a willow tree, which he is cutting down with an axe. Tarvos Trigeranos is depicted as a large, heavy-set bull standing in front of a willow tree. 2 cranes stand on his back and 1 on his head. Vulcan is shown standing with hammer and tongs. Another monument that portrays Esus can be found in Trier, Germany. It keeps the woodcutter imagery and adds a bull's head and 3 cranes, presumably a reference to Tarvos Trigeranos. The 3rd primary source for Esus comes from a section in Lucan's Belle Seville, a Roman epic poem written in 65 CE, and refers to gory sacrifices offered to a triad of Celtic deities, Teutates, Esus, and Tyrannus. And those who pacify with blood accursed, savage Teutates, Esus's horrid shrines, and Tyrannus's altars, cruel as were those, loved by Diana, goddess of the north. So here we have a triad of gods, Teutates, Esus and Tyrannus, and I would postulate that there may be a connection here to the pan-Celtic god Lu, or Lugus, a member of the Tuatha De Danann, who were a supernatural race of beings in Irish mythology. A god with three faces, or three heads, held an important position in the religion or belief system of the Celts of Gaul. We know this from the trisphalos figures represented on many Gallo-Roman monuments from around the 1st to 3rd centuries, which were found all over Gaul from Belgium to Aquitaine in the southwest of France, and bear witness to this wide diffusion of the cult of this god. Could there be a connection here between three-headed pagan gods and the Christian Trinity? Marie Sinclair, Countess of Caithness, in her 1876 book Old Truths in a New Light, states that it is generally, although erroneously supposed, that the doctrine of the Trinity is of Christian origin. Nearly every nation of antiquity possessed a similar doctrine. In ancient Sumer, the universe was divided into three regions, each of which became a domain of a god. Anu's share was the sky. The earth was given to Enlil. Air became the ruler of the waters. Together they constituted a triad of gods. Thomas Dennis Rock writes in his book, The Mystical Woman and the Cities of the Nations, the ancient Babylonians recognized the doctrine of the Trinity, or three persons in one God, and the use of the equilateral triangle as an emblem of such Trinity and unity. In ancient Egypt, the hymn to Amun decrees that all gods are three, Amun, Ra and Ptah, and there is no second to them. The ancient Egyptians' influence on early religious thought was profound, and they usually arranged their gods or goddesses in trinities. There was the trinity of Osiris, Isis and Horus, the trinity of Amun, Mut and Khonsu, the trinity of Khnum, Satis and Anubis, and so on. In fact, throughout the pre-Christian world, we have many examples of divine trinities. James Bonwick summarized all of this in his 1876 work, The Egyptian Belief of Modern Thought. It is an undoubted fact that more or less all over the world, the deities are in triads. The rule applies to Eastern and Western hemispheres, to North and South. Egyptologist Arthur Weigel summed up the influence of ancient beliefs on the adoption of the Trinity doctrine by the Catholic Church in the following excerpt from his 1928 book, Paganism in Our Christianity. It must not be forgotten that Jesus Christ never mentioned the Trinity, and nowhere in the New Testament does the word Trinity appear. The idea was only adopted by the Church 300 years after the death of our Lord, and the origin of the conception is entirely pagan. It has been suggested by some that Esus was the son of the Virgin Mother Mayence and the sun deity Gut. Esus was a healing saviour, also known as the deity of vegetation, related to Baal and referred to as Lord and Master. Romans regarded him as Mercury or Mithras. His element was the wind. Esus is also a river god, fisherman, and a tree god, carpenter. The Unit priests of Cybele were named after the river god Calais. Links between Anatolia and Gaul go back to at least 600 BCE. The cross was an important symbol of the Druids and a component of their worship. A tree in a cross shape with lots of branches was considered holy. The round shape of the cross represented the sun deity Gut. The worship of nature and vegetation was ritualized by the Druids. They would hold candles, sprinkle sacred charged water, burn incense, and pray for the ancestors or the dead during these rituals. Sound familiar? Their god Esus is said to have died on the cross with a lamb on one side, which symbolized the innocents. and an elephant on the other side, which some commentators have alleged signifies the sins of the world that he came to redeem. While the Druids worshipped, they would face the east towards the rising sun and sing hymns and say prayers to the sun and his son, Krios, or Jesus. Is it possible that the story of Jesus originated in Gaul throughout the ancient cult of the god Isis? Jesus was, of course, baptized in water by John the Baptist. The cult of the fresh waters was important to the Gauls and Celts. The veneration of water has often been characteristic of ancient peoples. Wells, pools, and lakes were believed to be the homes of deities who exercised their will in their own localities. The Celts strongly believed the water has healing powers. The position of Jesus Christ during his sacrifice and his crown of thorns resembles in many aspects the tree god Cronus, the Gallic god of time. In winter, the horn god dies, and in spring, at Imbolc, he is resurrected to impregnate the fertile goddess of the land. In the Gospel of John, John the Baptist is quoted as saying, "He must increase, and I must decrease." This is clearly astrotheological, as Christians celebrate Jesus' birthday at winter solstice and John the Baptist's birthday at summer solstice. But the most striking resemblance is that of the sacrifice supposedly practiced during ceremonies dedicated to the god Isis. During these ceremonies, as attested to by Lucan, the victims were tied to a tree and flogged to death. One of the Druids would then spear the side of the victim and, depending on which way the blood trickled down, would indicate how the following year's harvest would perform. In the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, Jesus is described as a tekton, which has been poorly mistranslated from the Greek as meaning carpenter, when it actually means architect. Arch equals chief, tekton equals builder. Jesus was a master builder, or freemason. To draw any definitive conclusions is problematic in the extreme when it comes to the pagan god Isis, because there is so little that's been discovered or recorded about him. But I'll end this video with some fairly juicy speculation. As we do know, the Romans invaded ancient Britain and Gaul over 2,000 years ago. In those lands, the Romans discovered tribes of people who were not afraid of death, thanks to their lord and master Isis, the god of builders and craftsmen, who perpetuated the spirit of his people through its most solid constructions. Was it the eternity of the soul of his people that he represented in his buildings? Was he the pruner who continues to shed light on a multi-millennial civilization by preparing the tree that will give rise to future construction? The time has long passed, the truth forgotten, but perhaps now it has resurfaced. So there you go. What did you make of that? I would love to know. Let me have a look here and see if I can see anything about what you're saying there. Yes, Christ and Krishna Kemon. Okay, yeah, I did a presentation on the historical Jesus a couple of weeks ago, and I covered, I think the guy's name was Tony Bushby, an author that I found on Michael Tazarian's website, who's written a book on the historical Jesus, and he was talking a lot about Jesus's twin, and I think they were both referred to as Krishnas in that. Anyway, yes, Isis is often compared to Baal as well. Right. Anyway, get lost in that, and I don't want to get lost in that because I've got to bring Rob on. And I'm afraid this week I can't work out. They're constantly changing things, so I can't work out how to get your questions onto, thank you, Nancy. That's all right. Onto the screen. So what I will do later is I will look at the chat on here to see if there are any questions for Rob. And remember the golden rule: if you want to ask a question, please put it in capital letters. There's not even a bar that I could control, though. Sorry, I'm having a moan live on the on YouTube because there's no bar that I can control. Very strange. What are they playing at? I don't know. Anyway, okay, let's take that off. Right. Okay. There we go. Right. So before I bring Rob on, I'm just going to read you this. It's the opening to his first chapter in Traces of Troy and Levantum. It's a quote from the Brute Tacilio. Okay, so, and then when the island had been divided, Brutus desired to build a city, and he went the island's length, seeking a place suitable for the purpose. And at last he came to the banks of the river Thames, and he traversed the bank along the sands. And when he found a place lovely and filling his desires, he built a city there and called it Troyath Nuith. Apologies for the pronunciation. And thus it means New Troy. And thus it was called for a long time. And then by corruption of that name, it was called Trinophant. Okay, it was also called Caer Lud as well at some point, very early, I think, in the 1st century AD. Okay, poor old Robbie's been waiting for ages. Let's see if he's still there. He is still there. He's just having a drink, so I'm going to bring him on now. So please give a very warm welcome to Robert Shaw. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. Sorry to keep you all that time.
No worries. It's an interesting thing. It's a nice video.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's about a year old now. It was mostly speculative, really, because so little is known about Esus, that we know of anyway. There's a couple of statues, and there's a poem by the Roman poet Lucan, and there's like four lines basically on Esus, and they weren't very complimentary about him, and I suspect it's probably propaganda. That's my gut feeling anyway on that. But there we go. Okay, mate. So your first book, which I read a few months ago and thoroughly enjoyed, was Architecture of Power, 1666, Plague, Fire, Famine and War. A great piece of revisionist history. So you moved back 1600 years for your second book.
Yes.
What was the spark for this? What was was there a particular moment when you decided, right, I'm going to write a book about this?
Well, nice one. Watkin Books in London asked me to do a talk about Architecture of Power a while ago. Did that. It was a kind of a dream come true. Watkins is a really cool bookshop.
Mm-hmm.
And got to know, I'm friends with a guy who works there called Mike Gilmore. And Mike Gilmore a couple of years ago said, have you ever thought about looking at what was in London before the Romans got here? Ooh, and I thought that was that was an interesting question. So really, I mean, the thing that connects them to is obviously London, and I'm going to say buried or hidden history, because I couldn't believe what I found out about what was going on around the time of the Great Fire and the Great Plague, and suddenly London was, it was more stricken by disasters than anything you find in the New Testament. But for real, what was going on there blew my mind. And with Ross's support, kind of put that into a slightly bigger context of what was going on at the time. And I guess at the time and since, I've got quite good at digging into original sources and looking at evidence, because there's what people say and then there's what people do, and what people do is normally a better indicator of what was really going on, right? You can say, as King Charles II. Oh, I love London. London, I really care about London. But that's what he said. What he did was got some of his mates to turn the water off before the night before the fire hit. So, so with the archaeology, well, the pre-Roman stuff, I knew, or it's one of those things. The Romans tended to use religion for politics, right? They'd come along and they'd try and befriend the local gods of wherever they were trying to colonize. So I started looking at where the Romans built temples, where the Romans built their first buildings, and especially religious buildings, because it seemed likely that if there had been anything there, the Romans were going to build on top of it, maybe make it nicer. The Roman baths in Bath were on an ancient site. There's a natural spring there, but obviously what the Romans did there was, a lot more sophisticated, I'm sure, than whatever may have preceded it. So it's a bit like that in London. You get told time and time again that there's nothing in London before the Romans got here, and I can show you in a bit if you like. I mean, there's stuff going back thousands of years before the Romans got here, but somehow it's sort of like a cognitive dissonance thing, I think, for certain people. They say, right, there was nothing before London, except this and this and this and this and this, and there's a long list of stuff. Not necessarily like a city like the Romans would build, because that wasn't the culture. Not like a city like was in the Middle East or in Greece or Egypt, but there was habitation. There was whatever you want to call it. I don't know when a habitat becomes a town or town becomes a city, but there was people living in London, and there was more than that. There were some big buildings or some big building in London. So that's kind of how, I don't know the history of really anywhere else apart from Britain, and more specifically London. I'm sure, if you were living in France, there'd be elements of French history that have been, make the royals look good at the time, and then later on make the Republic look good and make the royals look bad. History's written by the winners, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, the great irony about all of this, of course, is the Romans seem to think that there was something going on in London.
Yes.
Prior to them arriving in 55 BC.
Yes.
Tacitus tells us, and I quote, Londinium, though undistinguished by the name of colony, was much frequented by a number of merchants and trading vessels. So why is there this seemingly concerted effort by academia to ignore or even cover up London's pre-Roman existence, would you say?
Well, I'm sure people, from the Britain's hidden history side of things will understand this is not a one-off. I mean, we're going to talk in a bit about another massive thing that happened in London that no one knows about. It's amazing to me. It was amazing to find this stuff out. But essentially, they say, the first thing you do to colonize people is destroy their understanding of their history. And the British, the Welsh-speaking culture that existed in this country for several thousand years was suppressed and has been suppressed since, to pick an easy date, 1066. And especially the Normans went around, killing people that they didn't like, and people who were telling stories that they didn't like about, Britain. For example, the British hero, and again, excuse my pronunciation, but Maxim Wledig, that guy went from Britain and conquered Rome, and the Normans didn't want the British knowing about that, for example. So history is written by the winners and controlled by the winners, and let's say the winners in this country are the people, 200 families who still own the same land that William the Conqueror gave them, right? You're not going to, if you're born a baron or, an earl, this is a great system, right? Because you're an earl. You're not going to upset that apple cart, and you're going to protect that apple cart. So, the Tacitus thing, Tacitus is regarded as a really good source. Like some historians, you know, they get their credit rating. His credit rating's really high.
Mm-hmm.
He was around, I think, you know, say about 100 AD. He was around, and he was writing about things, you know, within his, let's say his father or grandfather's lifetime, like relatively recent events.
Yeah.
And he's well regarded, like with like pretty much everything he says. And then it comes to London, and he says, well, although London was not a colony, i.e., one of those Roman towns that they came in and built in a kind of like a you know, like IKEA furniture, they'd build a town, they'd build a great big fortification to a plan. Even though London wasn't a colony, not a Roman town, it was much frequented by, you know, ships, merchants, and this, that, and the other. So it was there. There was a port. He's saying, anyway, that there's a port there. There must have been a port in London, and that it existed without the Roman, you know, the Romans getting involved. And if you like, I mean, there's one thing that I think just archaeologically, I mean, explain this. Hang on, sorry. So I hope you can see. Hang on. Sorry. Let me see. Now, can you see that? This here. Sorry, that is the remains of a coin.
Yes. Yeah. Caswallen, isn't it?
I can't remember. Let me tell you my story about this coin.
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, when the Romans got here, they took over coin making. Coin making's big business. So this was obviously made before the Romans got here, right? Because the Romans took over coin making. Now, when they examined it, this coin was unfinished, but when they examined it, it had the name Canty on it. So it was the Canty tribe in Kent.
Kent, yeah.
So if you can imagine, you want to trade, you know, with France, you're living in Kent, you've got lots of choices. Where Dover wasn't necessarily a big port at that time, but Llyd nearby was, Richborough. There were a few, you know, ports on the coast of Kent. So if you were buying and selling goods with the Romans, you could do it out of a port in Kent. But what's very, very telling is this coin and the mint that was used to produce coins was actually in West London. So why are the people in Kent making coins in West London if there was nothing in London, right? There must have been a port, a trading hub that made it worthwhile for them to make coins in the area is called Barnes Elms. It's sort of West London. It's marshland. A few years ago, they were digging a sewer, and they found this mint with coins fully made and half made, big stone kind of protective walls. It was a big like oppidum, like a big hill fort, and it belonged to the Canty tribe. So what were the Canty tribe doing in London striking coins if there was nothing here?
Yeah.
They surely would have done it, you know, on the coast of Kent.
And wouldn't that have been because London was the Trinovantes, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, sorry, carry on.
No, I was just thinking, really. I mean, London, the area of London was occupied by the Trinovantes, not by the Canty. They were based, as you say, in Kent. So
right, seems to me it's ridiculous to say that the name Troynovantum and the tribe Troynovantes were not in any way connected. I mean, people do argue that, but wow. I mean, you know, that's a big stretch. Oh, and of course, to explain this, what they often say is, "Oh, Geoffrey of Monmouth made them up," which is what they say about so many things that subsequently has been corroborated. There's a wonderful example of a guy called Androgeus, who Geoffrey of Monmouth mentions, who's around the time, about 1 BC AD, he was around that era, maybe a bit before. And Androgeus this, and lots of people said, like they just, in their modesty, say Tacitus doesn't know what he's talking about. They also say Geoffrey of Monmouth doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, he just made this guy up. Androgeus is just a work of his imagination until... I think 30, 40 years ago, they found coins with this guy's name on it. So either Geoffrey of Monmouth was psychic, right? Or you know, however you want to put that, or he had really reliable sources of information that could name names. And it's ridiculous, the contortions some of the arguments go through to try and say the Brute Tasilio was actually was copied from Geoffrey of Monmouth, and then Geoffrey of Monmouth made it all up. It's just it doesn't bear scrutiny. But yeah, it is shocking, or certainly very telling, that people nowadays go, well, that guy Tacitus didn't know what he was talking about. Here I am 2,000 years later telling you what definitely did happen, even though there's really, really, really good archaeology that proves things were going on in London. That coin is like a really clear example. There are votive offerings. There was a bridge, or at least a pontoon, in London that's dated to 4,500 BC. So that's long before the quote unquote Celts got here, or whatever you want to call them. People were living on the river. I mean, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Right?
It makes me wonder. I might come across a little bit like a conspiracy theorist here, but it makes me wonder how much has been discovered in London that has either subsequently been lost or discarded, thrown away, that doesn't fit the official narrative. I mean, can you imagine? It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, we're going to talk in a minute about probably the biggest thing that I've found in the archaeological records of the Museum of London. I haven't, this is in the official archaeological record of London, but the way in which these things are hidden or accident. There was an archaeological dig. They found a temple, and uniquely, as far as I can see, all the finds associated with this temple were lost, and all the records of them misplaced. And when we talk a bit more about the temple, you'll see why maybe there was a motivation to bury that or destroy that evidence. And it wouldn't surprise me if it happens. It happens quite regularly, For example, I'm a big fan of, I think it's Guatemala, there is enormous stone heads, like 15, 20 foot tall. They're called Olmec heads.
Yes, they're all over South America, yeah.
Yeah. The Olmecs were apparently the first people to make stuff in stone in South America. And if you look at these heads, I mean, they look African, right? They look like West Africa. They look really, but people will tell you, oh no, they're just artwork that people made out of like huge bits of stone, beautifully carved. And it's not that there are Africans who sailed the Atlantic. Of course not. It's that they made up these things and decided to build these things that look exactly like Africans, just out of their imagination. It's just like, oh, come on, dude. There's that economy that comes with being rational, where you don't have to bullshit, so much, right? And I think for me, what was amazing was really quite quickly looking into temples, looking into the early Roman buildings. Really quite, within a few months, it became clear there was some stuff in London that certainly know what they do not tell you about, and they literally try and bury and hide. And it was definitely pre-Roman, definitely.
Okay, so this is the ancient British pagan temple that was discovered underneath the Roman Forum at Fenchurch in London.
Yeah, Cornhill. Yeah,
that's right.
Cornhill. Yeah.
Which is now, I think there's a large skyscraper that's been built on the site, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I've got a book that you told me about by Peter Marsden.
Yeah.
Internet Archives. Hold on a minute. Just bear with me 1 second while I cue that up. There it is. Okay.
Well, this book is they got together, this guy Peter Marsden got together all the archaeology of this area where the Romans built their forum. And can I show the picture?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Because this is the book, right? But if you can see that big square building, right? That was the size of 4 football pitches.
Wow.
It was the biggest, civic building, biggest public building in Northern Europe that Romans built. Absolutely enormous square, built on thousands of tons of rubble to give it its base. But it's hard to give you a sense of scale. But it's like, I don't know, 3 or 300, 400, 350 maybe meters squared, something like that. Absolutely huge. Biggest thing they built in Northern Europe. And underneath that, there was other stuff. So, I mean, you know, I'm not Indiana Jones or kind of any archaeological expert, but, you know, things on top came after things underneath, and there's stuff underneath the Roman Forum. Yeah.
Okay, let me just key that up and I'll share to screen. Okay, any second now, that should appear on our screens.
Yeah.
So there's a cover as you've just shown us. I'm going to try and skip a few pages here, and I'll obviously zoom in when I've got the right page. Oh, what's happened there? Hold on. Oh, what is it? That was, I showed you this early before. It was working. Now, why isn't it working now?
Yeah, same reason my computer packed up and I'm using my iPad.
Like Oh, hold on a minute.
Yeah,
hold on.
Page 10. Page 10. There you go.
Ah, right. Now we're getting somewhere. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and get up to page.
No, it's not that page. Hang on, let me have a look.
Page, right, okay.
Hang on. It's a few pages on from that.
Next one.
Here we are. Yeah, nice one. That's the one. So that's great. I mean, what you can see on the right-hand side is basically the big, how can I put this? There's the basilica, that's that building that's at the back. It's like the office building. That's sort of a big, long rectangle with, say, half of its upper wall missing, but you can see it. That whole area was a square, so you have to imagine something as deep, you know, as long as it is wide. But right near the bottom of the screen, there's a tiny little rectangle that's on a bit of an angle. Yeah, just there. Oh, hang on. You had your finger on it nearly. Where is it? Can you put your finger? Yeah, just to the left of there. Yeah, that one. Thank you. Wicked. That is underneath. Now, it's not obvious from a top-down plan, but the elevation of the Roman Forum was like about 13.5 meters, and the the lintel, the bottom of the door of that temple, was at about 11.5, 12 meters. So it's a good 1.5 meters underneath the Roman Forum. So it's underneath it. You can also see, it's not the easiest to see, but you can also see that the temple's at a bit of an angle, turned a few degrees clockwise off true north. So the point with this building is it was underneath and at a different orientation, at a different angle to the Roman building on top.
Right.
That little bit at the top of the building, there's a little bump. That's, an apse. An apse is where what you have those in temples to put the statue of the god. It's a temple because it has an apse. What's not on this diagram is also what's called the telemos. If you can imagine a square going all the way round that temple, about 3 times as long as the temple is tall, the square, sort of all the way around it. That was a walled garden that they found remnants of all the way around. So this building had an apse, which makes it a temple. It had a temenos, a sacred garden around it. It was a temple. Like if you find that anywhere else, there's no doubt it's a temple, and that was a temple, and it's underneath what the Romans built. Therefore, it predated it. Also in this area, I'll show it in the book, there's different archaeological digs at different times, a few to the north and a few to the south, have found remnants underneath the Roman level of walls 2.5 to 3 meters thick. Now, stone walls that thick are not decorative. That's a defensive structure, right? You don't build 2.5, 3 meter thick walls for any other reason. So the temple, it seems, was surrounded by some kind of, as well as having the temenos, which was more like a planned beauty spot, if you like. It had around that, it had massive defensive walls, and all of this is underneath the Roman level, and predated the Romans. Interestingly, in his book, this guy Peter Marsden, there's a page where he says, well, look, we found all this stuff, but this stuff, and he's mentioning these big walls at the time, this stuff, none of that fits the Roman story we're telling here, so we're just going to leave it out. We're going to omit that information from further consideration. So around this place, on top of Cornhill, which is the natural high point in the city of London, where there was a spring, so like a perfect place, you know, to set up your home, or if you're Brutus, you know, your new capital city. Around this area, there's a temple underneath the Roman level, and there's evidence of defensive or huge thick walls in this area, all underneath the Roman level. So I can't think of a reasonable explanation where the Romans would have built a temple underneath. I don't get it. Like, you know, how could you do that? Yeah. And this temple, when you look up on forums and other Museum of London sort of chats and try and ask people about this, they don't want to talk about it. And it's hidden history, literally. But I mean, it's there in the archaeological record, but no one can give you an explanation for what it is.
Yeah, you've got the book with you there, haven't you, Rob? Yeah. For some reason, I can't. It's quite a big book, this, so I've not been able to find any photographs. But I believe there's some photographs of the original dig, and
really?
Sorry,
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
I've seen some photos somewhere.
Sorry, in this book. Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Hang on.
There's one or two photos, I think, that show part of the pagan temple, the foundations or whatever.
Give me a second. I can find what there is.
Okay. Let me stop sharing screen actually while I.
Yeah, you see, I don't know the photos so well. I'm more of a words guy. Hang on. Plates. Here you go. Yeah. So in the back of this book, there's a section called plates, which is, you know, ye olde way of saying. I don't know why they don't call them photographs. But here's, again, it's going to be very hard to see, but you can see the measuring stick, the meat stick there.
Yes.
The archaeologist. You have to go a long way down. You have to go underneath the Roman layer to find this temple. So explain that. It's a good meter lower than where the Romans built. So
yeah, amazing.
Well, it's in any other circumstance, you'd say, well, that clearly was, you know, that's underneath that, so that came first. Yeah, and there are other bits and bobs sprinkled around London, some evidence of roundhouses, some other bits and bobs, but there's nothing like a temple. I mean, that must have been, I mean, that was built out of stone, was built in a particular style that really kicked off in Greece about 500 BC. It's called Distyle in Anstis. It's where they used to put votive offerings, you know, like if you wanted to, you know, ask the gods favor, you'd have a beautiful statue or whatever it was. Apparently tripods were quite a popular votive offering, but you'd hand over something of value to the god, and the priest would go, thank you very much, and take it back into the temple, right? That happened in Jerusalem, that happened all over Greece, but as far as I'm aware, that would be the only Greek style temple in Northern Europe. And obviously that's a big, it's a surprise, but go into quite a lot of context as you know, as to the sort of Trojan connection. When you look at all the chariots Julius Caesar faced, when you look at what Tolkien said about language and what other people have said about the Brute Tasilio, there's good evidence that there's that kind of influence there. So you could make a case for the Greek style temple being built anywhere from about 500 BC to about 50 BC. Anywhere in that period, it could have been built. Yeah, but it was definitely there before the Romans got there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm just going to very quickly bring up the chat to see if we've got any questions. Although, as I've previously mentioned, it's all new today in my studio, so I can bring them up on screen, but I'm not sure if I can navigate or move up. There's no bar that allows me to do that. So at some point, oh, hold on a minute, we've got Daniela McNeil was asked, were there 7 hills beside the garden? I'm not sure if that's a question for Rob.
I'm not aware. No, I mean, that would make it like there's the 7 hills of Rome. That's the only reference I can relate that to. Not that I'm aware of. No, not that I'm aware of. The river Walbrook ran north to south into the Thames. That was the, if you like, the heart, it seemed, of the port that was in London at the time.
Okay, right. There was also a giant cathedral that was built in, I think, around 380 AD.
Yes,
slightly later, and that stood on what is now called Tower Hill.
Yes,
and that kind of conflicts with what we're told about the birth of Christianity in this country, with Augustine coming here. I think it was around 500 AD. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone.
I think it was 597.
597, even later. Thank you. So more or less 600 AD. But this was here in the 300s, apparently.
Yeah. Magnus Maximus, Max Hledig, went from Britain to Rome eventually and set himself up there. His legacy was destroyed. They call damnatio memoriae, destroy his memory. That's what the Romans set out to do. But he was obviously very influential, became Roman emperor. But there was a guy, a contemporary, you could say, more or less, a priest, a monk, who's known to us now as Pelagius.
Yes.
And Pelagius went from Britain to Rome and argued against original sin, which was a fairly new idea at the time. He was saying before about how the Trinity was, if you like, grafted on to the Christian story. Original sin, I mean, it seems pretty. I mean, Pelagius' argument was essentially God is good. We are in God's image. How can we be? How can we be born into sin? Seems a very misanthropic, like, kind of guilt trip. And he went to Rome and argued there, and he travelled around the Middle East. But when you read his name, they'll tell you he was the heresiarch, not a heretic, not a very bad heretic. He was the arch heretic, heresiarch. Like, there was no one more heretical than him. So he was around at the same time as Magnus Maximus. And one way or another, at that era, 380, 390, a cathedral, certainly the most modern cathedral and one of the biggest in Europe, was built on Tower Hill. It was the size of a football pitch. It's about 100 meters long by 50 meters wide.
Wow.
Absolutely enormous, covered in marble. There are all kinds of features of this. And I showed you this before we had a chat, but like, to actually find out about this, to find any detail about this, you have to find this really obscure archaeological record.
What's it called, Rob? Because it's
Roman London recent archaeological work, including papers given at the seminar held at the Museum of London on 16th of November 1996. Guy called David Sankey found this. And again, when I learned about this, because I was looking for temples in London, right? This popped up. And then I was like, I tried to contact him. He was like, oh, it could be a granary. And I was like, tell me any other granary that was covered in marble that had an apse in it, like a space for a god. And that was the end of that conversation. This here is the floor plan. And it's pretty much where Tower Hill is now. So you've got to assume that when William the Conqueror got there was a lot of rubble that he then laid out as the basis of his tower.
Wow.
But again, no one will tell you about this. And this was clearly in 380, 390, whatever, not a Roman Catholic building, not a Roman Catholic church, because Roman Catholics didn't get here till 597 and start, converting the Saxons in Kent. 200 years before that, there was the third biggest cathedral in Europe. And we were chatting about this before. I think maybe in a couple of years' time, I'll get it together to write a book about Magnus Maximus Pelagius and this cathedral, because it's absolutely enormous. It existed and no one knows about it. It's like, and even the guy who found it doesn't want to talk about it. So there's something going on with our history, which Ross decided, you can legitimately call it hidden. Right? It's not publicized. It's downplayed. And in the case of the temple in London, all the finds associated with that were lost, which they never do.
The strange thing about this, Rob, is that if you go on Wikipedia and you type in Pelagius, they'll tell you that he was British and possibly Irish even, and they'll go into all the history about him going to Rome and trying to, get free will voted in, etc.
Yeah.
And then on Wikipedia, they'll also tell you about Christianity being founded here in 597 by St. Austin.
Yeah.
So that's a huge contradiction, surely.
Yes.
Am I missing something or what?
It's a big hole, isn't it? It seems to me
doesn't make any sense.
Roman tendency, if we don't like it, we'll just obliterate it. We pretend it's not there. I mean, I can't help, to tick another or talk about another Britain's hidden history theme. I can't help but relate that in some way to the historical fate of Prince Arthurus at Morrigat Tudrig, that leader who was clearly a very, very powerful force in this country and one independent of Rome and independent of Constantinople, as it would have been at the time. The guy Justinian was trying to reform the Roman Empire, because he'd had a bad couple of centuries, and this guy Arthurus and his people seem to want to have nothing to do with it. So again, you're gone. When it will find a way, they find ways of obliterating people from history. I mean, if you look at the official Roman records, there's no mention of Magnus Maximus, Maxim Ledig, ever being in Rome, because they didn't want anyone to know about him. So, and you got to figure something similar. I mentioned those big Olmec heads. It's not a process that's unique to London, right, or Britain. It's the Romans did it all over the place, and people continue to do it today because if you can tell people they were nothing but they painted themselves blue and lived in caves, you go, oh, right, then you don't get taught there were 4,000 chariots that chased Julius Caesar pretty much off the country. You don't get taught all of this stuff.
Yeah, there was several foundations or holes to these roundhouses that are found in several places around London that probably predate the Caesar invasions.
Oh yeah,
and those settlements typically house around sort of 200 people, so they're dotted all around London and stuff. So there were clearly thousands of people living here. Well, in that area in London.
Yeah, I mean, again, before about 1960, when the Museum of London got to the Roman level, the archaeologists got to the Roman level, they stopped because they knew there was nothing underneath. Now, in the last, 50, 60 years, they have bothered to look underneath. And in what you call central London, Fleet Street, where the city of London is central London, they've found at least 3 clusters, like you say, of villages, whatever you want to call them, of roundhouses that would have been able to house a few hundred people. So again, probably all over London you'd have found those if you'd bothered to look down. But if you stop at the Roman level, you're never going to find anything underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's. I've got one more question for you, Rob. I showed my Isis video at the start of tonight's episode.
Yeah.
Who were the old gods of Trinovantum, would you say?
Oh. Well, to a certain extent, your guess is as good as mine. The particular temple that I found evidence for. I make an argument in the book that it was probably dedicated, or more likely rededicated, to a particular god.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a really great book. Hang on, Shrines and Sacrifice. I could get it out. I got a load of books that I read, but what's her name? I'm trying to remember the author's name, but what she points out is there are loads of different names for different gods. But if you found votive offerings, they were one of three sorts. One was like little miniature, maybe gold, maybe iron, maybe lead, little axes or swords. So like offerings to a war god. One was more like coins or things of a more, mercantile nature. So one was, you got offerings to a war god, offerings to a god of invention, a god of trade and commerce and language, and then the third one was a goddess of like the household. I'm going to say kingship. That's not the right word. Monarchy and healing, and those sets of votive offerings. It doesn't necessarily matter. Her point was it doesn't necessarily matter what you call the god, but they're found all over the place, but separate. So there was likely to be a trinity, like you mentioned, with because really interestingly, in British roundhouses, if you look at the DNA associated with them, women stayed put. It was the woman's, the matriarchs, whatever you want to call it, roundhouse. She stayed put. The men went off. The boys went off and probably tried to find other, families to join, and women to marry. But the women stayed put. So it's very, very likely, overwhelmingly likely, that it was a sort of top goddess, maybe, we know her now as Britannia, but Bridget was a very, very widespread name from the Brigantes. Bridget means marvelous or wonderful or great. She was a goddess of the hunt and a goddess of healing, a goddess of the sort of home. And then you've got maybe, I'll use these two names. Other names are available. Belenus was the kind of almost like Apollo, very, very ordered, very to do with language and communication and invention. He was kind of like, if you like, of the two brothers that there's a lot of mention of. He was like, if you like, the guy you could bank on, if you like. Well, that's a bad phrase. The guy you could trust. And then there was Brennus, and Brennus was a bit of a war god. He had other names like Colchester, where the Romans built their first town. It was called Camulodunum, and Camulus was the local name, I believe, of the war god there. The war god would be the guy who you'd see charging around on a chariot. It'd be the guy today who probably does drinks a lot of lager, goes and plays rugby, and speeds around a place in his BMW. Do you know what I mean? They're the boys. The boys would be into Camulus, and they were into their chariot fighting. So you've got this fairly clear. At least this is what I've understood from the English heritage people, that it all over the place. You might have different names, but the war god was a war god. The trading, inventing god was that guy. He was kind of like the trickster. And then there was the queen. Okay. So that's the analysis that I've seen sort of repeated, if you like, in different contexts. I have to say, you said about, was it Esus, Tarantis, and who was
Tyrannus? Yeah, Tyrannus, Esus, and Teutates. Although sometimes you get Esus, Tyrannus, and Belly. So it's either Teutates, who I think was a god of war, but don't quote me on that. I'm going from memory.
Yeah,
and he's sometimes called Belly. Esus was a god of healing and vegetation, as I understand it.
Yeah.
And Tyrannus I haven't looked into much yet, but Marshall knows a lot about Tyrannus.
Now, I don't know if Marshall or anyone else would agree. I think it's interesting anyway that, from my understanding, that generally there had always been a woman, a goddess, on top. And it's interesting that as let's say the Christian era, whatever you want to call it, started, the Trinity became a trinity of three male figures. And there's this whole thing about the from Bronze Age to Iron Age, the transition from a more matriarchal to a more patriarchal thing. And I will go on record. I mean, I'm not a Christian as such and all this. I just think it's really messy. And, you know, forgive me for saying this, but like all the world's problems are because of a woman listening to a talking snake and eating fruit. I mean, of all the stories in the world, to blame people for something, that seems particularly far-fetched. And it's interesting that as the Christian era began, the female goddess certainly disappeared from that trinity.
Very interesting. Okay, I really want to look into this a bit more deeply in the next few days and weeks. It's absolutely fascinating, and thanks for that, Rob, because I haven't come up with that idea before where you had a triad of gods in this country and one of them was female. Perhaps even the principal god was female.
It would seem so. It would seem so. I mean, again, that would talk to what you could argue, some would argue, is like the Etruscan, Tuscan, Trojan inheritance, because they seem to, you know, in what's it called? In Etruscan culture, women had a lot more rights than they did in Roman culture. They were neighbors, but they were very different, right? And the status of women, you know, in Greece and then in Rome, where it took a bit of a nosedive. And when Christianity came along, that didn't help in that respect. You get me? I mean, because God, you know, I think if you go all the way back in the Bible, God was male and female, but then, you know, they pushed the woman out, and we've got a war god all by himself, and that's the West. That's the history of the West. Some people say it's like, what happens when an angry man doesn't have a woman to calm him down? Do you know what I mean? Pretty
much. I mean, I could add to that, but I don't want to upset anyone that's watching. It's very difficult, isn't it, to speak freely about this?
I mean no one any disrespect about their beliefs.
No, me too.
As long as everyone understands beliefs are beliefs, that's that we can all respect each other, right?
Absolutely.
I hope so. Anyway, I don't mean anyone any disrespect.
Yeah. Okay. Right, this has been great, Rob. The one thing that's been missing tonight is everyone else's comments and questions that I usually put up onto screen, particularly questions. But unfortunately, it's changed, as I mentioned before. It's all changed in my studio, and I'm not able to go up and down in the chat, unfortunately. I can put it on the screen. Marshall says the Adam and Eve story in the Bible is a garbled and inverted version of the story in the British Edda. Wow. Okay.
All right.
And Marshall's doing a video very soon on the British Edda with Melissa Campbell, so I'm really looking forward to that now.
All right.
Okay, I'll just hang on for a moment. If anyone's got any questions or they've put questions into the chat box tonight, can you copy and paste and do it again now so it pops up on screen and I can read them to Rob? If you've got...
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, go on, mate.
Well, the Holy Ghost is historically female. That's Marshall saying that. I don't know what she's referring to. You know, I mean, you mentioned Trinities earlier. I've got a lot of, I like the story of Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And there you had the mother figure. And obviously with Mary, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, you had the mother figure. And let's say Abraham, you know, the three Abrahamic, whatever religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam tend to be a bit man heavy, don't they? I mean, you know, the what do you want to call it? The cosmology is mainly male.
Yeah.
And I think certainly when the Etruscans and the Romans were going toe to toe, the Etruscans would cuss out the Etruscans. You respect women, you know, like, because in the Roman view, life was patriarchal.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the funny thing about the triad or the Holy Trinity, if you like, is if I'm getting this right, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't appear in the Gospels, the Trinity. It was something that was attached to Christianity, I think, at the Council of Nicaea, or at least one of those councils in the 300s. Prior to that, it wasn't mentioned in connection with Christianity. I don't think I'm wrong about that. Anyway, we've got.
There's a question here from Merlin's boy.
Yeah.
Where was the quarry for the stones under the Roman trash? Now, under the Roman Forum, under this thing, they said there was a huge amount of rubble. And I did some maths, because to raise the area up the size that they did over the area that they did, they needed about, my maths was approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rubble. That's a lot. Now, London doesn't have any native stone. So where did that come from? I think the answer is that there were retaining walls around Cornhill. There was a stone wall, and it was massive. There were comparable things in Britain that are 2.5, 3 meters thick and 6 meters tall. Now, if you had walls like that in the area, you'd knock them down like the Romans like to do, crush them up and build on top. So Merlin's boy, where was the quarry for the? I would say it wasn't quarried; it was repurposed in a way that's very, very similar. And the sort of model or example I used was the Temple at Jerusalem, because when they went there in the year 70, they crushed everything down, they destroyed everything utterly, and then built on top of it. And they actually got the locals, the local Jewish population, the local Jerusalemites, to do that, because it's especially soul destroying or psyche breaking to get the defeated enemy to smash up their own temple.
Yeah.
So anyway, likely that the rubble underneath the Roman Forum came from previous construction.
Fantastic. Cheers, Rob. A couple of questions quickly before they disappear.
Yeah.
This one is from Marshall Abraham. She's asked, was Charles III in hock to the Venetian bankers in Holland before the Restoration?
Well, he was. I don't think he cared. I mean, hang on. Let me be careful here. I mean, Charles II was in a lot of debt to a lot of people, principally his cousin Louis XIV, who was King of France, right? Mm-hmm. But not to Venetians specifically. If anything, the Venetian bankers, they set up, Venice was set up so you couldn't have a king who was in charge. Venice had a doge, right? Like a guy where there were lots of checks and balances, and, you know, every so often a doge would get too big for his boots and would be destroyed. Charles II was very, very much of the opinion that his father had been God's appointed on earth, and God's appointed on earth had been executed by the London rabble. When he came back, him and his circle were very clear that the city of London, that walled city where all the bankers were, including the Venetian bankers, were the enemy, because they're the people who had paid for the civil war that had ended up with Charles I, who, you know, Charles II's dad being executed. So not specifically, he was in debt to all kinds of people, but not specifically Venetians, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, brilliant. Melissa Campbell has asked, why is Bran's head buried under the Tower of London? What's the significance?
Well, I'm not. That's obviously a very long-standing story. I remember reading that story when I was very young. Now, there's a cult and where is it? Unearthing London by Simon Webb. It's got a great chapter on the cult of the severed head. Now, one of the prized things, if you're a warrior in Celtic culture, one of your prized possessions was the decapitated head of your worst enemy, of the fiercest warrior you'd ever bested. And there's a long-standing connection between Tower Hill and severed heads. Long before the Tower of London, severed heads were believed to be deposited there, probably because the god of war, if you like, had a temple there. There was something very martial, something very violent about the god of the Celtic warrior god. So on that site long before Tower Hill, long before the church that we mentioned that was built in like 380, for hundreds of years before, thousands of years before that, there seems to have been a cult of the head there, and specifically what they called excarnation. That's when you get the body of a noble, and rather than letting it rot away, you put it in a protected space, and then you let birds eat the flesh. Once the birds have picked away the flesh, you clean the bones up and you store them. And that's called excarnation. And it was practiced in that Tower Hill area of London, obviously for a long time. So I'd say, I don't know the specifics of Bran head. You know, Arthur, I mean, there are some other interesting stories about other heads there, but the association with severed heads at Tower Hill goes back centuries before Christ. So I'd say that was the rough answer there.
Okay, I'm scribbling away the questions before they disappear super fast. Here's one from Kemi Cora, who was asked, what is the one biggest mystery connected with ancient Troy-Novantum, would you say, Rob? The one biggest mystery.
I'd say it's cultural inheritance, because it seems some very clever people who spent a lot of time looking at this over hundreds of years were very clear. We had a Trojan, our culture, maybe just the ruling elite, I don't know. There was a Trojan backstory to our culture, and that's now dismissed as fantasy. And you know, in the Brute Tasilio and in other stories, it says every time Brutus, you know, he went on his journey, when he came to Britain, he had a look around and he built his capital in London. And it says it again and again. And I guess the mystery is, why don't we know this? Why has that been, you know, why has that history that has substance to it been turned into a myth? Like Prince Arthur, you know, King Arthur, whatever. There are things that sometimes, and I'd say this in relation to, I mean, you know, you've mentioned you're a Ripper fan. Sometimes
I'm not a fan of Jack the Ripper. I think he was horrible.
No, that's not what I meant.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So sometimes people make a mystery out of a thing to stop you seeing what's really going on. And I'm sure you're aware of some of the Freemasonic stuff that went around. My interpretation is sometimes things happen and you have to turn it into a mystery to keep it a secret. Otherwise, people find out what's going on. So you muddy the waters. And then you get people to suggest 10 different people who could have been Jack the Ripper, rather than the one really of, you know, and you muddy the waters. You mystify things.
I'll answer this question for Rob. The Elf Queen has asked, where is the best place to buy your book, Rob? Cymroglyphics.com. Cymroglyphics.com, Cymroglyphics, Cymroglyphics.com.
If you like, there's also Watkins Books. That's easier to spell. Watkins. Watkins Books in London sell, you know, they're fans of the Cymroglyphics thing. They sell a lot of Wilson and Blackett, and I'm really proud, mate. I have to say, I'm really proud. There's Alan Wilson's work, there's some stuff, and then there's my 2 books on Cymroglyphics. You know, no one can, I mean, I'm very, that makes me very proud. So yeah, Cymroglyphics or Watkins. Someone here said, someone asking about King Lud. Do you mind? Because
no, go for it.
Well, essentially, what seems to have happened, according to the Brute, is after Caesar's invasions, the British were like, what the, you know, they were not, no one expects the Roman legions, right? They got seriously, they had to really, really think about the future, because they didn't want to be slaves, right? Around that time, after the time of Caesar's invasions, it says in the Brute that London was really, really remodernized. Fortifications improved, lots of stuff was done. And it's about that time that it changed its name from Troy-Novantum to Caer Lud, Lud's fortress. Now, Julius Caesar was very clear. He came to Britain because the British kept on helping the Gauls fight the Romans. He came over here because the Romans hated the British, giving them trouble by coming over the Channel, mixing up with the Romans, and then going back to Britain again. Julius Caesar said he came to Britain to try and quell the British resistance to Roman rule. It seems to me likely that the Lud was kind of like the god that really didn't like the Romans, who stood for freedom, who stood for Celtic, whatever you want to call them, values, and not being a slave. So Caer Lud was almost like was what London was renamed about the year 1 AD. So after Caesar's invasions, but before the Claudian invasions, it was Lud. Was the god of the rebellion, the god of no, we're not going to be Roman, no, we're not going to be slaves. And interestingly, in France, he's called Lug. Look, you mentioned him in your video, the three-faced one. And in Ireland, he's Lug with a GH. And the Romans talk about Lug, L-U-G, a lot, and they talk about Lug, L-U-G-H, a lot. There isn't any Roman writer who ever mentions Lud, L-U-D. Seems to me that he was written out of Roman history because he was a bad example. He was the god telling you to fight until death, to not succumb to the Romans. There's more to that, but that's roughly London, or Troynovantum became Caer Lud when that city became modernized and fortified to try and fend off the Romans. Didn't work, but it seems to be certainly when London became known as Caer Lud as opposed to Troynovantum.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. We've had a brilliant question from a lady called Suzanne Price. Thank you, Suzanne. She has asked, Rob, is the moon associated with London? In Irish, Luan is moon and Dun is fort or stronghold. Wow.
Did not know that. I'd be interested to know. I mean, I know in French, Luna is the moon. I don't know what it is in Welsh, but I'd be interested. I'm sure there'd be. So one thing that's clear. So there's the whole Trojan Wars thing, right? Whatever happened, a load of Greeks went over to Turkey. A load of people in what we now call Greece went over to Turkey, what we now call Turkey, and took over. And it was a big deal. And basically, one way of being able to tell where that happened and where it didn't is because sun worship, male god sun worship, kind of took over from female goddess moon worship. It seems the Etruscans revered the moon more than the sun, and also the Celts, the Gauls in France, they used a lunar calendar, and they used to, according to Julius Caesar, they didn't start the day or count the day from when the sun rose, but from when they used the moon to count the day. So the beginning of night, when you could see the moon, was the start of the day. So there was an awful lot of emphasis on female leadership and the moon.
Yeah.
So yes, that was definitely a big part of the culture, much bigger. And one of the things the Romans hated was like Boudicca riding around being a war leader. There would have been Roman men, back in the forum back in Rome, clutching their pearls at that because a woman was in charge. That was anathema to them. So yes, there was definitely a higher status for female goddesses, goddesses, and the moon.
Brilliant. Okay, we've had a couple of comments, Rob. One is from Hugh Evans, who has said Lun, L-U-N, is moon, and Din, D-Y-N, is city in Welsh. Lundin.
Lovely.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, clan, L-L-N, is sort of like clan, sort of like Tristan area of. There are different etymologies. I mean, I've There's a woman called E.O. Gordon, who wrote a book about London's Celtic past. She points out a few things to do with the possible name. I just think in the Brute, it says it's called Caer Lud. The Brute's good enough for me, or it's as good a source of information as I think you could ever hope to find. I mean, it blew my mind what's in that. But they said Troynovantum had its name changed to Caer Lud whilst they were, pimping the place up, improving the defences, improving the whole infrastructure of the area. And this was after Julius Caesar had invaded. So they were reacting to the Romans coming here, and Julius Caesar must have left quite an impression.
I'm just going to finish on this comment, Rob. From What Makes Britain Great, they've said Lud Lor Eraint, I think that is, also known as Lud of the Silver Hand, is a legendary hero from Welsh mythology, believed to be the source of the figure King Lud in Geoffrey of Monmouth's history. Well,
there wasn't. What there was there were kings around that time, and all of them have got coins. There wasn't a king Lud. In the Brute, it says about the reigns of Caswallon, the reigns of this, the reigns of that, and then the subheading for Lud is the story of Lud, or even the fable of Lud. It makes it explicit in some translations of the Brute that there's the history of this guy, the history of this guy, the story of this guy. And if you read some of the story of Lud and his brother, it's very weird and it's allegorical. There's other stuff going on. It's not like the reigns of other kings where they say, oh, he did this, he married this person, this happened. With King Lud and his story, there's a dragon that turns into a pig. It's all very allegorical. It's not a history, and it makes it clear in the subheading. It's a story, the fable of Lud. So yeah, this is really interesting. Having a look around, the Lydney off the Severn. If you look around there's some very ancient areas associated with Llud there, or Llud. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce that, but Lud of the Silver Hand. Also, there's the Lyd in Kent. If you look, that name pops up, and it's often in places with good harbourage, and I'm going to say good harbourage, therefore likely to be linked to trade and commerce and all the imagination and ingenuity that's associated with all that sort of thing. It was definitely a creative figure. He wasn't like he wasn't a browbeater. He was more a Del Boy than a than a bruiser. Do you know what I mean? More Del Boy than Tony Soprano.
Brilliant. Okay. Right. I think we're going to end it there, Rob.
All right.
The comments are still coming in, but I'm struggling to keep up at the moment. Unfortunately, I've had to improvise a little bit tonight because of the change in my studio with the questions. So if you did ask questions for Rob, perhaps put them in the comments underneath this video. And,
look, if anyone's got any, I'd be delighted to try and answer any question or any criticism or any inquiry. I'm not. I might just have to answer. I don't know, but I'd be very happy over the next couple of days. It'd be a real pleasure to be able to add anything if I can.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that.
No, thank you, mate. Yeah,
it's been great. Okay, please like the video and hype it if you've got the hype option underneath the screen somewhere. And if you're new around here, do please subscribe to the Britain's Hidden History YouTube channel. I'll be back next week.
Do you mind if I just do this to you quickly on air, Paul? The Hawksmoor tour, is that on the 12th? Or the 5th?
I'm waiting for a Mr. Brown. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I know Mr. Brown.
To confirm that date, but once he's done that, then I can start, advertising.
Just between you and me, I told my missus it's the 5th, so I might need you to sort that out for me if we're doing the 12th instead.
Say last bit again. Sorry.
I told my missus I'm doing it on the 5th.
Oh.
So now, if we're changing it, I need some kind of email or something to make it official. If you don't.
Oh, okay, yeah. No problem. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Then. Okay. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been fantastic. Cheers, Rob.
Thank you.
Join me next week when my guest will be Hugh Evans, who happens to be author of the month on Graham Hancock's website at the moment. So his books are gaining a lot of traction. We'll be discussing his second book, The Origin of Numbers, next week. So please tune in for that. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll try and get the chat sorted out for next week. Cheers. Thanks, Rob.
See you, mate.